started today. I have jokingly referred to this as the kickoff of the 75th Festival of Nations Tribute. But really, when I heard that it was coming together, I thought the library has to be involved. And I thought, well, how will the library be involved? And of course we have to have a Friends of the Library book sale. That's happening tomorrow from 10 to 4, outside in the South Lawn and also downstairs if you want to stop by. And then what better way to celebrate the library and the Festival of Nations than with thinking about our dear Bob Moran. I think most people in this room knew Bob, but raise your hand if you have never heard of Bob Moran. So we've got some. You are in for a treat. You will think that we have made up some of these parts of Bob because as a librarian thinking about him and his life, it's like, pretty sure that's a novel, right? There's not one person that lived all those things. But he did. So you're about to find out. My name is Jody Moore. I'm so glad you're here today. I am the director of the library since 2006 when I had the honor of taking over upon Bob Moran's retirement. He held this position for 40 years, and his adoptive mother, Marian Adams, held the position for the previous 40 years. So, while I am not related to them in any way, I do make the joke that 19 and a half years in, I haven't quite hit my halfway mark here at this library. A couple notes of housekeeping for those who don't know, the bathroom is through that doorway and to your left. There's also a water fountain out there if you need. During the program, the slideshow, we will turn the lights down so that we can see the screen a little better. So just be mindful of that. If you need to get up and walk out, there will be a cord right here in the front. We have today, recording us is Jay West. Thank you, Jay. And that's because there are so many folks who couldn't be here today. And it's because we now know we should be recording what happens right now because what's happening today is history, not too long from now. So we are being recorded. If that makes you uncomfortable in any way, then don't stand up and wave at the camera. Hopefully, eventually, we will make this available online so that we can share it with the folks who couldn't be here in person today.
It will be available at the museum on their website.
On the Carbon County Historical Society Museum.
They will have links.
We will have a link to probably a Vimeo or YouTube video. Is that right? Okay. Let's see. We've got Merv Coleman today. He's going to give us our slideshow, and then we'll move into Betsy Scanlin, who is as close to family as one can claim to Bob Moran. And Betsy will lead us in the singing of the Bob Moran. Did everybody get a copy? If you didn't, raise your hand and Betsy will bring you one. If you've never sung this before, it's that Beach Boys song, Barbara Ann. You know it, you'll figure it out. It's Grand Lark. I heard some people working on harmonies. We'll see what we can pull off. So thank you, Betsy, for bringing that together. We've got a donation bucket that is to support the Carbon County Historical Society Museum. Museums and libraries are like, cousins. We love each other. Libraries.
And we're right across the street.
We are kitty corner each other too in Red Lodge. Libraries are lucky to be supported primarily by local tax dollars, which means in this difficult federal season, we haven't had too terrible of impacts to our budget. However, museums are struggling more, and our little museum needs all the help it can get. So if you feel fit, as Bob would have, to support the museum today, you can make a donation in that bucket. There's also a way to make a donation online. And we have available for purchase, with all proceeds going to the museum. This is their updated festival cookbook, and this is Betsy's The Red Lodge Festival of Nations, a memoir. Each of these are $25. If you would like to purchase those, cash works, check works, and there's a little QR code you can scan if you'd like to pay with a credit card. And I think, if you haven't seen this yet, this is a nice little brochure that tells you everything that's happening this weekend. We don't have a ton of copies of this, but we do have some. And so I'll make more copies if we need to, if you'd like to grab one of those. And then after Merv, after Betsy, we're gonna invite folks in the room to share their own stories, because if I've learned anything here, is that everyone who knew Bob has a Bob Moran story to tell, and they're usually pretty good. So you will have an opportunity to share at the end, and then because Bob had a sweet tooth, we will have some refreshments today at the very end. I saw Linda Beach yesterday and I said, darn it, I should have commissioned Arlen to make apple turnovers for everybody. But I didn't have that foresight or the budget for apple turnovers, so instead it'll be little cupcakes from the store and delicious cookies from Betsy. So thank you all for being here. I think we're in for a treat, and here's Merv.
So I thought I would start with reading his obituary, and it's not too terribly long, and it describes Bob pretty good. So, Robert Walter Moran, a Red Lodge cultural icon and mentor to many, passed away peacefully in Red Lodge on Sunday, November 10th, 2013, at the age of 88, following a full and well-loved life. Bob was born October 5th, 1925, and was raised by Dr. Edwin M. Adams and his wife Marion Edwards Adams, the librarian of the Red Lodge Carnegie Library. Nurtured by these eminent personalities and surrounded by endless shelves of books, he developed an early passion for literature and the arts that later resulted in his many gifts to his community over his lifetime. Following graduation from Red Lodge High School and 2 years at then Montana State University in Missoula, he served in the U.S. Army from March 1944 to May 1946 in the Rhineland and Central Europe as a message center chief trained in library science in London. Upon his return to the States, he finished his college education at Missoula. A brilliant student, he continued his studies as a Fulbright scholar at the Sorbonne in Paris, France. He taught French and English briefly at Red Lodge High School before becoming the assistant to Mrs. Adams at the Red Lodge Library. I think Bob was not maybe the greatest teacher at the time. I mean, he was probably a great teacher, but he just didn't have the discipline of the kids. I talked to some of his former students, and it said it was pretty wild affair. Upon her death in 1965, he continued as sole librarian, serving the community as its literary champion for 50 years before retiring at age 80. His role as librarian was legendary, knowing readers' interests well enough that he left piles of books on their porches and car seats. There were no late fees ever, and he remembered every reader as well as every book that was still out. The library served as a cultural center of the community where he was able to assume significant roles. One was coordinator of the Red Lodge Festival of Nations. For over 50 years, he inspired participants who preserved the cultures of the early immigrant Finns, Scandinavians, English, Irish, and Welsh, Scots, Italians, Germans, and Yugoslavians. He was also a founder of the Red Lodge Music Festival, which celebrated its 50th summer, but now it's 60-some. As a memorable camp for students and faculty from many states. A longtime board member, he saw the Aspen of Montana camp grow from 9 students to 241 in his beloved hometown. He was a 50-year perfect attendance member of the Red Lodge Inquiry Club, where he was the unofficial historian and events planner, feeding his insatiable curiosity through members' bi-monthly presentations of their expertise. He was active in the Carbon County Historical Society, where he had hopes for a permanent Festival of Nations exhibit. I think that's happened.
Which we have.
He was a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 4725, Red Lodge, Granite Peak, which will provide the gravesite services for his service. He was a longtime active member of the Community Church of Red Lodge, United Church of Christ, and its predecessor, the Red Lodge Congregational Church. He was a member of the Star in the West Masonic Lodge, number 40 in Red Lodge. He had strong interests in all things new residents, movies, books, retained knowledge of all of them with amazing ability. Once a newcomer discovered the library, Bob made sure he or she knew which local nonprofit needed him or her. Young or old, mentoring each to become a meaningful, contributing member of the community. Debonair and gracious, he was always the gentleman. Following the Adamses' passing, he was an extended family member of Reverend Donald and Millicent Scanlin, survived by their children, Tom, Steve, Carolyn, and Betsy. In truth, however, all the Red Lodge was his family, embracing him as he embraced them. So we'll go through some of these slides. Maybe.
So we get turned
Oh,
over.
I gotta hold it the right way.
Okay. There we go.
This was a picture I did of him for the community church directory some years ago. And I wish that I had got him in for another setting sometime because I like doing old men. And that's just what I read. So. Anyway, these pictures were at Bob's memorial service. I think probably Betsy put most of them together. And anyway, we'll kind of go through. I think this is Bob here. Must be one of his classmates. Yeah, I don't know. Betsy, do you remember what era this, how old he was?
No, I would only guess maybe sixth grade, fifth grade. Middle school.
From what I gather, he had a pretty rough childhood. You know, he was kind of on his own a lot and was kind of a rough and tumble existence until he became part of the Adamses family. Graduation. Military service. He just looks so young to me. Yeah, I assume this is a military one. I don't know. And he was part of the Masons, and I just always assumed with the picture that he was in here somewhere, but he's not. I mean, it'd be amazing if because he never missed a meeting of anything.
Probably took the picture.
Yeah, maybe he took the picture.
I think that's Doc Adams, though, the second from the right and in front. No, on the other side, the right.
Oh, this one.
With the,
I think that was
tie.
It's either him or the third field. That's my dad, fourth field.
Aww.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is really Bob or not, but anyway, it was part of his experience in being in the military in World War II. He was a staff sergeant. Must be a little R&R on the beach over there.
Yeah. Staying in good shape.
And this is definitely not Bob, but I think think it's probably the message center where he probably worked. And I think this was probably his student ID when he was
At the Sorbonne.
in Sorbonne. Mrs. Adams and the dog. The dog was in a lot of pictures, so I assume the dog was really important.
Look at the baby library. So sweet. Did Bob like
And this was probably his, well, I'll talk about it, but he at the community church, he was always there to take tickets, sell tickets. This was probably maybe one of the last pictures. This was probably the harvest dinner. He was on oxygen for the last 6 or 7, 8 months. Memorial garden in his honor. Okay, so this is the Inquiry Club, and so this was when the Inquiry Club was 100 years old, and so Bob is not in this because this was the following year that he passed away. But he was just such an integral part of that. And I don't know if you noticed the chair in the back there, the wooden chair with his picture on it. That's where Bob sat every meeting.
Hey, Merv, it more is saying that he had a 50-year perfect attendance
Yeah.
Right,
at this.
yeah.
And when I couldn't bring him one night, he went out from the Willows onto the highway and hitchhiked with his oxygen. So I miss his perfect attendance.
Aww. And his cushion.
So after he passed, we kept his chair and kept his memorial pamphlet. I think we kept it there the whole year for all of our meetings. So anyway, I have some things here about the inquiry and then just some general stories. So I've been here 45 years, and of course I knew Bob through festival auditions and Red Lunch Music Festival and everything. But after he retired at the age 80, he came to the city bakery every morning for coffee and an apple turnover. And so I have the honor of having coffee with Bob at the city bakery for every morning for almost 8 years. And Bob, without fail, would have that apple turnover every day, and sometimes 2. And you would hear him scream if they gave him a cherry turnover by mistake. So, after Bob passed, our next meeting that we had as an inquiry club, we usually have a talk and then we have refreshments. So anyway, we brought apple turnovers for that. So inquiry board member Dave Stoffer wrote the following. Bob was the undisputed heart and soul of the Red Lodge Inquiry Club. Currently in its 99th year, well now we're way over that. Continuous existence whose official purpose is discussion of social, economic, scientific, and other matters, with the added unofficial purpose of gathering mostly old men together for jokes, gossip, and tall tales. Bob was especially proud of Inquiry's annual cash award to the most improved student at Red Lodge High School. And speaking of that cash award, I forget what it was back then. I've been a member now for 38 years, I think. I'm the oldest. have a pamphlet that we keep all the members, and as you rise up to the top, you're the oldest, which means you get to adjourn the meetings at the end and play Santa Claus at our Christmas party. So anyway, the dues then were minimal. You know, I think they started out at $5, then they went to 10, and now 20. But the cash award, the membership dues, we were limited to 30 members. So anyway, the cash award, or the membership dues, didn't really cover the cash award. And we had some other expenses, the printing of the program. Bob made sure that at our Valentine celebration, that all the spouses had a flower. And so we never seemed to run out of money though. And that was puzzling to some members. So over the years, attempts were made, I remember, by Ernie Strum and Wally Olds to have Bob give a financial report. And Bob would reply with just a straight face, well, maybe next meeting. And the report would never happen. So when he went into the Willows, he, let's see, I'm going to go to this. Yeah, at about 10 months before Bob passed, he wanted Gary Allison, raise your hand, Gary, and myself to meet him at his room in the Willows. And when we arrived, we could tell that he had some very serious issues he wanted to talk about. With Gary, he wanted some help, because Gary was part of our little coffee thing in the morning. He met with us all the time when he was here. Anyway, he wanted some help with the house. He had some plumbing issues and help going through boxes upon boxes of papers, unopened mail. For me, he wanted to come clean and explain the finances of the Inquiry Club. Which, you know, he was trying to, he paid for a lot of stuff just out of his pocket. He was trying to build up the funds enough to where the interest would cover that cash award to the most improved student, because that was very, very important to him. And for the club, Bob did most of the event planning and would always make sure that our spouses had flowers, like I mentioned at the annual Valentine dinner, that names were drawn for Christmas party, and everyone received a gift, that the year's printed program of the member presentation events was done, and Bob always made arrangements for the gentleman's banquet, which was the last meeting of the year. We met twice a month mostly, but not during the summer, usually from September to May. And he was the go-to guy for any questions about the club bylaws, procedures, history of the club. He was the club historian for sure. And after his passing, we survivors floundered. Whenever there was a question, well, how did we do that? Well, where's Bob? None of us could remember. He was a member of the club for 50 years, never missed a meeting, like Betsy said. Only Doc Kane had been a member longer. And according to the Inquiry Club's constitution, members should be selected who are congenial in nature and young in spirit. And I couldn't think of anybody who exemplifies those values more than Bob. So I got just a couple more stories here. One, Doc Kane talked about, at Inquiry Club, after the presentation, usually it was time for just sharing stories. And Doc Kane was a great storyteller. So Doc Kane told a story about how he made a house call to one of the brothels in town, the Ladies of the Night, on the second floor of a building. And the entrance and exit stairs were directly from the street. So as he exited, he stepped out into the street only to meet a couple ladies from his church. Creating kind of an embarrassing situation for him. And Bob piped up and said, "Well, Doc, why didn't you just use the back stairs?" So I moved here in 1980, and I'm a photographer. Anyway, I put together a slideshow, a place for all seasons, to some music by John Denver. And it was a big hit. I showed it a lot around town. And finally, I did show it at the Festival of Nations one year. And Bob said, well, maybe next year we could get John Denver to come and sing the song. I said, realize how many little towns or small towns, or how many towns, were asking John Denver to come talk. And he just looked at me straight-faced and said, Red Lodge is not just any little town. Bob, in his later years, went on the Natural History Institute tour put on by Merv and Phil Robertson. And my friend Gary, co-coffee buddy, was on the tour with Bob. And really got the distinct feeling or impressions that Bob had never been on the Beartooth Highway, or on a very limited basis. When Bob asked you to do something, he really wasn't asking you, but instead just informing you of what you were going to do. Bob enjoyed each year of the music festival as if it was his first. He was always the first one to stand up at the end of a performance yelling, "Bravo, bravo." His enthusiasm never wavered. Bob was a longtime member of the Red Lodge Community Church, where he would always do the dishes and clean up after Sunday morning worship coffee. I think if anybody tried to even help, they were shushed away. Bob always sold tickets for the Red Lodge Community Church annual Fall Harvest Dinner or any other event. He was always there, or was set up in the hallway or foyer and taking tickets for the event. If the computers or internet were not working at the library, Bob would just say, "There must be a shadow over him." Many, many stories about his great memory, including books that had been checked out for years and not returned. He would just give a gentle reminder, "You have a book out." If that person showed up to the library, he would remind them of when the books were checked out and needed to be returned. Nothing was written or recorded, but he would remember. If Bob knew you were a reader, he would learn your reading habits. And when a book showed up that he thought you might like, Bob would put it in your car or even your house. And I think that's so Betsy, I think you're on.
Well, this is one of the Festival of Nations parades, and he's seen there with my dad, who was master of ceremonies for a number of years, most of the years.
Betsy, why don't you come on up so Jake can record you.
Can you hear me okay?
I know.
Oh, I don't know.
won't look at you.
Bob was very colorful, and you know, the festival wouldn't have lasted as long as it did without his coordination. And he kept it together year-round. He often, you know, paid for the big banquets for the Scots in the basement of the Elks. People didn't know where these funds came from, because festival was free. That's why everything this weekend is basically free, except for the banquet tonight, which is only $10 to cover the cost. But he participated just so joyfully in every nationality. And you'll see some of the things, even the granite peekaboos. Yeah, they wrapped him up in a little scarf, and he was out there dancing with them. So I mean, he really got involved personally with them. So I think this shows a good. I think Merv, this is probably one of your pictures, isn't it? Or is it one of mine?
No, it's one of mine.
One of yours. So
I love this in front of J.K.'s.
J.K.'s was Joe Kosrock, one of the Yugoslavians, Slovenian.
Great story.
It's called Daisy's. Daisy's.
Yeah.
But we had a parade every day. I recall it every day, but certainly on the last day, where every nationality had their own float. And there's one of Merv's when Bob had brown hair. This is the year that we incorporated the Festival of Nations, 1982. And you see Nick Kosrock in there, you see Tommy Agnes, Irma Capps, Norma Scheidecker, Montana, Vera Beauty,
Dale Olson, Tom Taney.
Tom Taney, and who's the gentleman on the left there, in front of Bob? He looks like a Finnish. Yeah, Finnish. And above Irma, who is that?
Irma. Above Irma.
Not next to me there, I'm on the right, inside. Anyway, but that was the year we incorporated, and we never made any money, but at least we had some legal status there. This was Festival Sunday at the community church, and everybody dressed up. And many of you older ones will remember all these. Susan Watterson was the minister, I believe, at that time. Bob's up in the corner. Elaine Higgins, Mona Nutting. All the way across. My mother's in the front with her bald hat from Germany. And then my two kids, my little boy who wanted to be a cowboy from Montana. And my daughter danced in a lot of the nights. She's in kind of a Slovenian costume here. And that costume I'm wearing was a part of the Tambourines Orchestra, which I was in for 35 years. So that captured a lot of the costumes, I thought. And there's
It's a peekaboo bubble.
You participated. I mean, isn't that something somebody from France would wear, you know, kind of clothing? That's what Dad made. And that would have been Italian now. You can tell by the tablecloths, right? So, and then some of those pictures are in this festival book, which is actually, all the proceeds from this book go to the Historical Society. If you get one, do write down people's names when you recall them, because they may not be remembered without that. So are people going to share stories then?
Yeah,
Or can we
I have one
Can we
more
sing?
that,
We're going to sing to it.
Yes. I think, Merv, you tell your story and then we should sing before we open it up.
yeah, the last several months that Bob was alive, he was at the Willows, and he considered that a prison. He just, he liked his freedom to be able to go, and it just was limited there. I used to go pick him up for inquiry I must have missed that. Anyway, he was always glad to get out.
He'd love to drive. Well, and at his service, we celebrated it as we left with a song, and I'm gonna have Charlie Brandon come up and sing this. Which key to put in. So anyway, he was beloved, and our community theater spoofs of the town regularly. We would honor different people in town, and I think that's the first place we sang. Was it one of those Restless and Red Lodge productions?
Anna told me it was in the 90s and it was called Love Means Never Having to Say You're Slimy. And apparently Bob found out that this song was going to be performed, so made a point of coming, which everyone was a little nervous about. And I guess it took place at what we know now as the Clay Center, but what at the time would have been the Carbon County Coal. Yeah. Okay, so Bob stayed for the whole show, even the body parts, and then at the end there's dancing, and he stayed dancing the whole night, and everyone had a grand time. So what a fun way to picture Bob.
Okay, Charlie, start us off.
Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Moran. Librarian. He's Bob Moran. He got me rocking and rolling. Universal learning Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Looking for a book to teach me how to cook. Ask Bob Moran. Enjoy where to look. Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. He's the man. Bob, Bob Moran. He got me rocking and rolling. Universal learning Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Got a big exam, really have to cram. Need a reference guide, so I gotta call the man. Bob Moran, Bob, 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 Bob Moran. He's the man. Bob, Bob Moran. If you wanna find a book and you don't know where to look, call Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Bob Moran. Librarian. He's Bob Moran. We shall show the world the beauty of the soul. That's Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran. Moran. Librarian. He's Bob Moran. God was looking for a book when Bob Moran he took Bob Moran. Bob, 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 Bob Moran.
Books and books up here, and in the back too, if you wish.
So I think we
Tell stories.
we have time for if anybody wants to share their Bob Moran story.
I have one to share because I have to run and make things happen for everybody. Thanks everybody for coming. Sorry I'm crying. Bob was the librarian when I came to town, when we first came to town in 2000. And he would always have a stack of books for my dad. And my dad passed away, but he was sick for a really long time, so his books were just really important. And it wasn't just my dad he did that for everyone. And I just think it's really beautiful. Thanks for everybody coming, this is great.
And for those who don't know, this is Becky Van Horn, and we couldn't be having this Festival of Nations tribute without her.
I'm gonna go before I have another breakdown. Thanks. See everybody tonight. Thank you. Yes. See you later.
I have one.
Renee, stand up.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Renee Tafoya, and my family's been summer residents since '55 in Red Lodge, and then I moved here full-time in the '90s. So when I was a kid, Mom was a school teacher, so we spent every summer in Red Lodge, and she took us to the library. I remember trying to go use the card catalog. There was that, all the little drawers. They were empty. Except for his sandwich.
Hi, I'm Steve Chelfate, resident here since, I don't know, I'm 58. The family goes back to 1895. But I too also have a Dewey Decimal System, because when I went to college, I was looking for where's Bob Moran to help me find books. And I realized what a gift Bob Moran had been is because he was the Dewey Decimal System. So it was great, and it was a wonderful place to live. Yeah, and we also wondered why I always lived at the big house over here. And that was the beacon. He usually left a porch light on so we could see better in the skating rink. That was really helpful too.
I'm Jenny Bourne, and I was in charge of the Scandinavian food sampling for a few years for the festival. And we had meetings beforehand with Bob leading the meetings, and we talked about the festival cookbook because a lot of people who had the samples wanted to know how to make them. So I suggested to Bob that maybe we should sell the cookbooks at the sampling. And one of the ladies on the board, Irma Cap, said, absolutely not. That's just not the way we do it. Well, Bob was very progressive, and he said, yes, let's do it. And so, yay, Bob.
I've got a couple. I'm Norm Chelfate. I was just looking through some old pictures a couple days ago. There was a wonderful, I think it was 1997 photo taken at Inquiry Club. It's Bob Moran, it's Doc Kane, Fred Schwinn, Dad, and Blaine Mann. Pretty stunning, all of those guys, and interestingly or oddly enough, Blaine and my dad died the same day in 2009. The other interesting photo was one that's similar to when he was in the military. Dad and Bob, together with their uniforms, taken at our grandparents' house on Hagen, probably circa 1945. And then the story was, it's probably within a week or 10 days before Bob passed away. He was down at Willows. I went to visit. I had another picture going, I know 4 of the guys in this picture, but who's the other one? Who would know? Well, Bob was a year behind Dad in school, classmate of my uncle. Walked in and asked him, who is that? Well, it says, I know it's Dad, and it's Glenn, Tommy Beckerinen, Frank Dell. Who's the other one? Oh, that's Kit Schmidt. The high school principal was C.R. Schmidt, and that was his kid named Kits. Well, I mean, it's who we went to school with, but Bob's the only one who possibly could have figured that out in 2010 or whenever it was. So that's it.
I got a couple. I actually just got the honor of playing for the Inquiry Club when Bob was there. That was quite an honor. And then when I was on the city council, had some dealings with Bob, and receipts were involved, so you know the rest of that, non-existent receipts.
That is another story I was going to mention when Gary helped Bob go through some of his old records and found all sorts of checks that weren't cash from the city. Drove the city treasurer just absolutely.
Yeah, that was one of them.
But there were other checks and envelopes that hadn't even been opened. Money was not important to Bob.
has been here since somewhere around 1915, 16, 17, 18, something like that. Our family had an Italian cafe and the Imperial Grocery and the grocery beer creek and all that. Anyway, Bob was a couple years ahead of my mom in school, and they were friends and knew each other and whatever. And the first year that I danced in the festival, like all kids do, I always spent the summers up here with my grandparents. And I was in Italian night, and so our little group of children was practicing, and Bob came into the Civic Center, and the Jersey sisters waved, and he watched us for a while, and we finished dancing, and I'm leaving, and he stops me, and he says, "Your eldest daughter." And it's like he just had that eye for faces and people and names. So we were always friends, and I'm still dancing. We're dancing tomorrow. Please come. One of my favorite memories of Bob was he always wore the pearly costume on English-Irish Day, and otherwise he wore his Hawaiian shirts. But he wore the pearly costume. I loved that. One of my other favorite memories of him, festival related, was the Civic Center, was closed and locked, and at 7 o'clock the doors would open, and that was in the days when the swarms of people come in. So Bob was the person in charge of telling us when to open the doors. So we were all positioned at a doorway, and he would stand in the middle of the Civic Center and he'd go, "Open it up!" And then because he was always following everybody, and he would get you to do things you didn't know you should do, but he also rewarded you for doing the things that you should do. And so at some point in time, I took over the international group up here, combined it with my international group in Billings. There's a lot of travel back and forth, blah, blah, blah. And one day he just walks up to me and hands me a whole bunch of cash. And he says, "Gas, dry cleaning, feed your dancers. See you later."
No receipt.
No receipt.
I'm John Clayton. Gary, maybe one of those receipts you found was for a modem in the mid to late 90s when the internet first came to Red Lodge. I thought it'd be a good idea if we had free internet at the library for folks. And people on the library board said, "You will not get this passed, Bob. We have been trying to computerize the library for years now, and he is dead set against it." Because what they wanted to do was computerize the card catalog, which didn't exist except in Bob's mind. And so it was a control issue, right? It was Bob's library. He wasn't going to let it turn into a computer library. But when I framed it as, "Well, Bob, this is a way for the patrons to be able to access the wonders of the wealth of knowledge on the internet," he was all for it. Back then, the technology was so simple, a modem was simply a thing you plugged into a phone jack. So I went down to Billings and bought one and put it in and connected it to the computer. It all worked great. I gave Bob the receipt so that I could get paid back for that modem. And then realized my mistake. I was happy to make that gift to the community.
Looks like it's
Anybody else?
cookie time. Anybody else?
Well, if you could tell the.
We have one more.
I forgot to make one remark. We've got a gentleman with us today in the back, if he'll raise his hand, Tom Rust. He is a professor from MSU Billings, and he is helping out this weekend with collecting oral histories specific to the Festival of Nations. And like I said at the beginning, it is so important. We don't feel like our story is as interesting as those of the folks that came before us, but they are interesting. Whether you're telling your story or the story from your parents or grandparents or your children's experience. So to have somebody here who actually really knows how to do that, has the equipment and the expertise, and will help put that together for the museum is an incredible gift. So tomorrow between the hours of 10 and 4, you can find him at the museum, or you can introduce yourself to him today. If you have a loved one that's out of the state or out of the area, I bet there's some way you can arrange for them to tell their stories and get those recorded. So I really encourage you to do that, because it's a gift you give to me to hear all these stories about my chosen hometown now, to learn these people. Even though I only knew Bob during the end of his life, I know him in a very unique way, and I have heard so many stories from people, and it's an incredible gift to give that. So don't keep your stories to yourself. Tell your stories, share them with your community, because folks will really appreciate hearing that in the years to come. So do you help yourself to refreshments?
Jody?
Yes.
I have one.
Well, just, would you tell the story about the medal that the bronze?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really don't know the details behind it. He did win a bronze medal during World War.
Bronze Star.
Or bronze. And
Battle of the Bulge is the story I got.
is that right? Yeah, I think he told me a little bit about it one time, but I've forgotten. I do remember Doc Kane had talked one night at Inquiry about his experience in the South Pacific during the war, and afterwards we were kind of talking, and Doc Kane said, well, Bob won a Silver Star, and Bob just looked at the floor and said, it was only a Bronze Star.
I've also heard from someone that Bob helped as a translator during the Geneva Convention. Is that, anybody else heard
Nuremberg
that one?
trials.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, Nuremberg trials.
Yeah,
He had multiple languages.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very impressive.
And in talking about his memory, and no card catalog, there was no circulation records either. It was all in his head. I came here when I first moved to town 30-something years ago, and for some reason I needed to look at the book, Bury My Heart at the Wounded Knee. He said, oh yes, we have that. Nancy Kreckler's had it for the last 5 years. The other story is we had a possibility of McDonald's coming to put up where the town pump is now, where they were talking about buying that lot and putting in a McDonald's. And a bunch of people in town, John included, wanted to do a protest, and we had the idea of getting a picture of Golden Arches and putting a big red slash through it. And mentioned that to Bob, and Bob said, well, I think I know where there's one that already has it. And he goes to the magazine rack down here and goes down to the bottom of this huge stack of Time magazines or something where some other community had done it, and flips through it and goes to the page where the image we wanted was. So astonishing memory. So the Fulbright Scholarship, that just fits with the thing. I mean, we were all surprised to hear that he came home when he had the Fulbright Scholarship in Paris. Why didn't he just stay in Paris? Well, we must be special. And that's how he made a lot of people feel.
Another thing I remember at his memorial service, I got up and represented the Inquiry Club, and there were other people that represented the Festival of Nations, the Music Festival, the church. I forget, there were
Masons.
yeah, Masons probably. Anyway, it was interesting that somehow Bob made every organization feel like they were the one.
So for those who didn't know Bob Moran when they came in today, he sounds like a pretty interesting dude, right? Over the years, I keep saying, why don't we have that Bob Moran book, John Clayton? But I think Bob was pretty protective of his stories, and it's hard to find someone that knows all of them. And maybe all of us together could cobble most of the story. But I think he liked to keep it to himself.
Guess he was the most private public person.
Yeah, everyone knew him.
Everyone
But
knew
did you
him, he
know
knew
him?
everyone, but no one knew anything about him.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. In looking at Bob's obituary, getting ready for today, I realized that if he were still alive, he would turn 100 this year, on October 5th. So I've been thinking we'll have a birthday party at the library for Bob. I think that'll be special. So hopefully some of you will be able to attend that. And I hope everyone takes in lots of the festivities this weekend and enjoys them. What a treat to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.